Okay, welcome everybody. This is our, what is it, the 7th or the 8th webinar, I believe, that we are putting on so far in 2024. It's an interesting one, a little bit geeky, but I think you'll find it very worthwhile. First of all, introduction. My name is Scott Whitty. I have the great honor of being the current president of the International VR Professionals Association. And we put on these webinars generally about monthly, and they are designed to bring you content that you really can't quite get anywhere else, including a lot of YouTube videos on similar subjects. And you'll see definitely, while you can get lots of analytics type of stuff on YouTube, you don't get what we're going to be showing you today. And that's one of the benefits of the educational programs that we bring. And these are free on the days that we record them. And then for IVRPA members, they can go to our rapidly growing library of webinars to get up to speed with so many different subjects. And we've got good ones coming up in the next several months as well. For those of you who don't know, IVRPA is the only organization in the world, member organization, which is dedicated towards meeting the needs of the VR professionals, the creatives, XR, because it includes the whole gamut, but the creatives as opposed to just large corporations. And that's where we stand as being unique. And if you are not a member currently, I heartily encourage you to join. You'll find that the paltry $50 per year is well worth it for the benefits that you get. All right, so enough chin wagging on my part. I will turn this over to Lauren Ibarrando. Lauren, have at it.
All right, hello everyone. As Scott said, I'm Lauren Ibarrando. And today I'm going to be giving a presentation on, it's really the second part of two presentations that were previously given. And I have linked to them within this presentation. The background image on this is a conceptual view of what's called a heat map or a user journey. And it's some of the emerging analytical tools or kind of front ends to an analytical tool to where you can look at how your product, XR product or website, virtual tour, game or whatever. And the red is where most people are traveling, and if ideally that's where the journey, that's where you're expecting them to be. The blue represents where people are starting to deviate from the experience, and so for a VR, that could be a very powerful. For a website, it makes sense, how you want them to scroll, what buttons you want them to click on, but that's a flat. For a virtual tour, being able to do that in spatial coordinates is very powerful because it allows us to start to place hotspots, to start to analyze where we drop a person into a scene, things like that. So let me get to this. What I want to cover today is close my windows here, I'm just going to quickly talk about the VR websites, the two that were the preceding ones. And then I'm going to get into what performance testing, and we're going to be using tools that aren't designed for us. They're designed primarily for business websites. So you'll hear talks about funnels and conversions and things. So I wanted to show you what are the metrics that are relevant to our content, to XR content and websites. There's tons of metrics, but let's look at the ones that can help you with your design work. The other thing I want to do is cover kind of a method of testing, which is known as A/B testing. And that's a very powerful way where you can take, so the preceding presentations about you design a website, it works. All the buttons click, they go where they're supposed to. You don't have any dead links. That was the one presentation. Then you have the Google Analytics where we're starting to track data back. But then how do you take that? How do you go about with the results and make changes with it? How do you use that data to change, in our case, to change content, layouts, resolutions, and we'll get into some of this, or UI elements, where If you're in a virtual tour, do you want to have thumbnails for navigation? Do you want to have a menu along one side? Do you think using arrows along the floor is the way to do it? Well, by doing what's called A/B testing, you can make duplicates and then slightly alter them for a design layout or change, and then collect the same data and performance and make data-driven design decisions. Then I'm going to cover just, again, we talked in the previous presentation about Google Analytics, and I need to do something here in the chat just so people have this. I'm going to drop the presentation in as a PDF because you'll see, oh, I need to send it to everyone. In this PDF, wherever you see the green links or things that I'm going over, they'll link you to, in this case, it links you directly to the IVRPA webinar archives, and those are the 2 dates for things. And as Scott said, these are behind a firewall, so you have to be a member to go view these. But I'll cover what was in those in case some of the people here are not members. And then I'll end with, I'll try to get to the heat maps and session recordings. And again, as Scott said, this is a pretty geeky subject. It's a very broad, very wide subject. I like to think of it, the background image, a lot of shiny red balls, and you can get lost in this. So there, move on to the next. No, sorry. So don't get too hung up on any particular tool, and kind of try to find what's the best method for you and what is the data that you're interested in. As XR content, we could have some of the users are doing 360 video, some are doing virtual tours, some are building CAD models or AR overlays. You're going to have different expectations or different goals that you want. So just to quickly cover what were the 2 past webinars that this one builds upon. First one was the VR websites. Things that were from that presentation that are kind of relevant to understand this one are the nature of the content of XR, especially VR content, can get you into issues regarding inodes. So when you go to pick a hosting provider, or if you're using software to build it, understand the nature of our content is slightly different. And then it talked to just how do you build websites, the various high-level methods. And for us, because we have VR content, we do have the option of not having a website altogether, if you will, and posting your virtual tours on 3D Vistas, hosting cloud, or Panel VR has some stuff for 360 cities, things like that. So that's an option for you, or just converting your things to 360 and then putting them on social media. Maybe that's how you're doing it, is Facebook VR, or perhaps you're doing Google Business virtual tours. And so your hosting provider or your platform is really, Google Maps and things like that. Then I covered just the really, if you get more deeper down into the coding and front end frameworks, and then the really high end stuff. Then just really quickly, we had a presentation about Google Analytics, and it was just how to set up Google Analytics to get yourself an account, to get an ID, how to integrate the tags within a virtual tour so that you're getting not just page time and traffic, which is what websites are. What's unique to our is that we have an interactive and an immersive product that we're building. So we want data on the scenes that people, as they jump from one room to the next, the hotspots, navigation arrows. If we're using a menu system, what are they clicking on? That's what we're interested in collecting. And so we have to integrate the tags at that level. So, but let's get into, I've been talking a little bit about this, but I want to just reinforce why would you want to analyze and test this XR content? Why would you want to do what I'm calling performance testing? You've already built it and it works. You've delivered it to the client. Well, you can make improvements, and you can grow by these 3 areas. You can improve the user engagement. You can, in our case, you can track the hotspots that you place in a tour, and you can find out if you're dropping a person into a scene. And I've seen this in data where I'll drop a person, have a starting point in a scene, starting viewpoint, if you will, and then I've got a hotspot floor arrows, navigation arrows, that one's on the right, one's on the left. Because most people are right-handed, I'll see people turning to the right to focus on that arrow, clicking on it, and never clicking on the left item or the left hotspot or the left arrow. And so from that data, I can know to maybe spin the room so that when they're dropped in, it's not the viewpoint isn't as important as dropping them into the room so that the first hotspot is to their right. When they rotate, they're now seeing the second. So rather than dropping them in between two hotspots, I can lead them in and I can have a more of a journey. And that's an example of how tracking that engagement at the interaction level can help us with UI design. The other one is to optimize performance. We deal with really heavy content, and we can get ourselves in trouble we like the quality, we like high quality, so we'll produce a virtual tour. If you've produced a virtual tour and you're putting the content out and you have a first-time user, person who's not familiar with VR content, their expectations, speed, loading rates, and things like that will be a website based. They're not going to wait for the VR content. So in that case, which you might be calling onboarding a first-time user, first-time visitor, you might be wanting to sending them to an entry or a portal where you've dramatically reduced the resolution of the panoramas. Instead of really high resolution ones, you've dropped them all the way down so they just get that immersive experience. So they're able to, and then when they move on to the next scene, you can slowly increase the resolution. So eventually they're up to a very heavy VR load. So that's called onboarding, in a way in which you can do that, or also the transitions between the panoramas. You can test that to make sure that that's smooth on all devices. A lot of time we don't do that, and you don't see that transition things. And then, as I talked about, the data-driven design using what's called A/B testing to refine content. You make a simple change, you run the website out, and you're collecting the data, and you see how is that change. Like I said, the opening scene, the starting viewpoint, where the hotspots are at. You have the menus open, thumbnails open, that kind of stuff. So I wanted to kind of get back to the point that I'm trying to present to you a very wide subject area. I'm trying to put this all into a small little package. And it's also a very broad skill sets. And for a lot of our audience, they just want a turnkey solution. The less they have to get into the programming or coding, the better. And that would be at the level of what I'm calling here the custom dashboards, or that's where you're hosting your content on another server and they have set up the Google Analytics ID and they're collecting the data and they're doing a very good job at it. I was impressed with 3D Vistas. They have the heat maps where we'll get into heat maps, but you're seeing here they're applying the engagement or interest or focus of the panorama of that scene. And I've just extracted this out from their analytics dashboard, but this is showing you the areas of interest and where you're clicking on and things. And that's, very useful in a quick little visual. So heat maps are an aggregate or an average of all of the clicks. So they're the overall behavior. We'll get to a user journey, which is an individual user session. And I want to try to get to that quickly so I don't get too boring here. And then just the kind of the 3 levels. The next mid-level down is where you have to go get a Google Analytics ID, and that's not difficult. And I have, again, in the PDF, I have all of the links on this link right here. It's showing you the piece of code. This is the extent of it. This is step 2. Step 1 is you go to Google Analytics, you set up for an account. Then you go in and you get an ID number. You grab this piece of code and you paste it into any HTML page, the launch page that you're starting with, just at the end of the head. And that's all you've got to do. When you get that ID, the solutions, the way that Pano2VR, Kula, or some of the other ones are doing, where they're doing the integration of the G tag for you at the object hotspot menu level. You just have to get your own ID because your virtual tour isn't hosted on their website, it's hosted on yours. And with that ID, you can then send the data back to you. And you're still with their solution, you've got to go into Google Analytics and make sense of the data. But by just pasting the ID into those programs, you're getting all of that data back. And I would encourage you, though, as we go through, I know that it's tempting to just want to do it at the turnkey level, but the prices you see there for these dashboards, those are on top of the existing solution. So if you've bought 3D Vista and you want the analytics, the cloud hosting is on top of that. If you're using Matterport, and this might have changed. Matterport, I had a little bit of trouble doing some research on them, but it looked like the best solution for them was a third-party application called Matter Traffic. And that there you can see the prices, and they have a range of prices that are varying from bandwidth or how many sites you might be using or things like that, right? They're going to go from intro to enterprise level individual. We got tons of clients. Um, I would just caution it's not a lot of work to put this in, and all of these solutions are all drawing the data from the same source, from the Google Analytics. So now the last way is if you're using KRPano or something like that, you're having to code the tags in at the interaction level. But I'll show that here in a little bit. So getting through now to the what do you want to collect? And in the area of speed, change that, move some things around here. In the area of speed and loading, what are the metrics that are important to us for content? And so this table right here, it lists 3 columns, the metric, a description of what it is, and I'll go through some of these, and then guidelines of, now these are guidelines for web, for standard business pages, things like this. It's tough to get VR or heavy XR content, 3D models and things like that. It's tough to get them into these or under these guidelines. But for first-time users, this is what their performance expectations will be. So if you are measuring, and we'll get to the measurement tools, if you're measuring these and these are coming up as negatives, or you're getting bad grades on them, they are something that you need to adjust with resolution changes, or you can do pre-caching where you load things in front. Maybe you have an intro page with a fancy something that's interesting. People look at it, but you're actually loading the first assets, the first panos, the first 6 faces or whatever of a pano in the background, or the CSS for the next scene. And there's what's called lazy loading, and that's kind of what our programs do naturally, where they have a preview image comes up and then more comes up. And then as you scroll in, and that's kind of streaming or multi-tiled is lazy loading. But again, if you're not making these metrics or these guidelines, these are based upon people's expectations for performance. So let's go through a couple of these really quickly. Page load speed, that makes sense, right? The time it takes for the whole page to come up, and you see that everywhere, but it doesn't tell you enough. So the 3 ones that I like to go with, and you'll see them in your reports by the acronyms alone. They're so common to all of the tools that one of the more important ones is this largest contentful paint. And I know that's not a word, but that's the acronym. You'll always see that as an LCP. You'll never see that spelled out. Total blocking time as well. So what are they really quickly? The time to first byte, that makes sense. That's the first time that a user clicks on the URL or touches a button or does something. When does the responding server first send them something? And that's an indication of either a slow server or a slow connection. And so I like to, in testing, I know I've got a good server. And I can go to a good connection, a good fiber connection, and test it. And that should be independent of whatever I've built. So that's a pure hardware bandwidth issue. The next one is the largest content of a plate. This is a critical one for us, and this is a lot of times the perception of speed, in that it's the object of interest that you're loading, and the biggest one. So think of it as a hero banner or a 3D model that's popping up that they're going to be able to rotate, or a virtual tour that's loading up with all the buttons and stuff, and then they're going to be able to move it. How long does it take before they see it as being there? It's loaded up, it's ready to go. The other one is very important for us, and it bites us a lot, is what's called total blocking time. And that's if you haven't designed the VR, you haven't designed your content correctly, your XR, and you're just loading a big mass of content up, you've bottlenecked So you're sending this big chunk of a movie or a video. We've seen this. And then at the end of that, it's got to load in some more, the CSS or some JavaScript, some more resources to allow it to function. The time between a user perceives that the item of interest is loaded and to when they can actually interact with it is called total blocking time. And that's an indication that you've got your coding is wrong or you got too big a font library, stuff like that. The other ones that are important for us, viewport change, and that's when mostly for mobile and desktop devices or VR, person moves the headset on or off. They resize the window on the desktop, or for mobile, they're switching the orientation. How long does it take whatever you've built to reassemble itself and appear again? Frame rate, I won't go over that. We know what that one is, just kind of an importance that they are different for flat and immersive. For immersive, you want a minimum, be above 90 frames a second, or else you'll get the simulation sickness, things like that. Latency, that's kind of an obvious one. And then there's a Google term called interaction to next paint, and that's an aggregation of all of the latency because that changes depending on what you're clicking on. And that's kind of a good number for what's the overall sluggishness of your content. So moving on to the next one, I'll try to get through these quickly so we can get to doing some demos. So, because I know this is kind of boring at the moment. For us in user interface design and content, in addition to just capturing the quantity of numbers, like how many people clicked on a page and went to it, what's important for us is a pattern. And there's three that are really important. They call rage, dead, and back. And for rage clicks, it's where you've placed something on the page that a person thinks should be interactive and they're clicking on it and they really think it should be working. So they're clicking multiple times. And it's like, and that a lot of times can indicate something's broken or you've got loading issues. And the emotion is it's a frustration for that. So that's kind of an indication of broken things. The dead clicks are where they click on something and nothing happens. And that's more of a confusion or you've got kind of misleading elements. They're not quite sure. But that's also, you'll see dead clicks on that one. And then back is a really bad one. Back is where they have, it can indicate that they've clicked on the wrong thing. But in our cases, a lot of they're clicking on an arrow, they're going to the next room. If they back out of it or if they open a hotspot and then they quickly close it, that's usually an indication of mismatched expectations. They didn't like what they saw or they're losing interest. And back clicks are a lot of times followed by a bounce, meaning that they leave and they don't come back. And so backs are kind of a bad one. And we'll see how those are measured. Last one, it's kind of important for us is a cumulative layout shift, and that's where when a page is first loading or something is happening, you're moving to another room. Do the elements shift around a lot? We've all seen that on a web page, and it's very frustrating to you, especially if you're going to click on something and that item is hopping around and skipping. That's a measurement that you can pick up. Okay, so getting into what the A/B testing or how do you go about taking this data, taking these metrics, right? So you've set up your page with Google Analytics. You've got data coming back telling you when everything's clicked and when did they click on all of that. You're able to take a look at what, you're able to pull out the relevant metrics to you that are telling you things about, well, how do you take that, oh, I've got something good, I've got something bad. How do you build upon that? How do you turn that into improving the quality of your design? And for us, that's even more important than a web page because for a web page, people have established standards. They know so most of the time when you're building on a web page or business transactions, you're building on very established expectations. People know what they want. They have strong user expectations. For our stuff, because it's so new, it's not really, we're developing what the UI UX standards are, what the best practices are. And I can't really tell you what's good or bad. So for us to test all these variables, all the different things that we can do, where we drop a person into a scene. Do we have a full 360-degree scene, or do we drop it? It's just all these changes. And if you don't test for these, then all you're doing is knowing how to build a website that works, but it's not necessarily, something that people engage with or that performs. And that's why you've got to do this kind of stuff. So you can test, if you're in a VR environment, do people like to point at things with a controller, or do they like to just gaze at it? And how many seconds do they like to gaze at something before it becomes interactive? And in my case, you're going to see, I'm going to show you an A/B test that I've got underway on a project, and I'll zoom into it. It's helping me. I knew from the data, I saw from the data that I was having a problem with this one scene. People would come into it and they wouldn't, boom, I had a bounce rate coming out of it. And I realized that I got a problem with the navigation arrow. If people are using navigation arrows and they come into the scene, the only other arrow is 180 degrees behind them. So they have to rotate all the way. So I was seeing a higher bounce rate on this thing. So I did an A/B test where I created just a duplicate of this virtual tour, except when they come to this scene, I've got the menu and the thumbnails turned off. So it's a little more prominent on that. And I can't make the arrow blink because of accessibility issues. This client doesn't want that. So I can't solve it that way. But that might be if I could have done another test where I had the arrow blinking or different colors or whatever else. Right. So I'm going to be able to test and I'll show you the results from that. Yeah, I talked about it, engagement, interactivity. Do people like a narration? If you have a virtual tour and you have everybody reading the text, if you do an audio version where all the text is automatically running, which one's performing better? You'll see a lot of times a lot of the manuals and discussions of these performance tools focus on what they call a call to action, and that's in business terms is where they're booking they're clicking on booking scheduling a session with you, booking a quote, purchasing something. For us, that call to action, I kind of like to think of is the person clicking on the next room, going to the next room, opening a hotspot, right? That's what these call to actions are for me. So understanding that terminology, I can do the same types of, like I was describing, do I drop them into a bunch of hotspots, or do I, lead them through it? It's kind of the gaming concept of free exploration, right? Open world versus head on rails, where we know that open world, where it's completely no restrictions, is not as good. And we know that driving a person through rooms and they can't have an exploration, that doesn't work good. It's a mixture of the two. So you can study that. I already talked about, playing around with the content quality, maybe adjusting the JPEG compressions, things like that. That's ways in which you can really dramatically improve the loading rates and see, is that impacting it? And then I already talked about testing, onboards and stuff like that. So just remember I'm going to get to the A/B testing and I'll talk about, because I have a testing going on and I'll show you the data from these two different versions. So in A/B testing, how do you do it? It's a huge area of, if you're a big giant website firm and you're building websites for Nike and they're selling products, they're into A/B testing crazy. They're testing the fonts and colors and what types of pictures of the shoe and what orientation of the shoe. And they're doing this all in live. And so the tools that are available for us tend to be a bit pricey. And I've got them on there. You can go look at them. They're extremely powerful, but they're expensive, right? Uh, and then they'd be, of course, on top of the virtual tools that we're trying to create. Yeah, look at this one. I hadn't seen this one. This one's by appointment only. Had to book an appointment to find out what the price was on it. But the other one at a commercial level, they do have a free trial, very short, but then it's $392 a month. So my guess is there's not going to be a lot of us that are going to want to pay an additional A/B. So what I wanted to suggest to you is a kind of an easy or just a brute force method, and this is the one that I use a lot of times, is you can set up an A/B test is just, randomly driving a person 50% to one option or the other. So let's see if I can click on it without it. No, I can't. Okay. You see the line right here. This is if you recognize, this is the KRPano embedding or the launch code you'll have an index page. And then this is how it loads up the XML configuration page. All of them, all of the virtual tour folks, they run like this, right? They've got a script that runs the configuration. It's a separate file. So you have an index page and it's going out and grabbing that. I create two different versions of this. I call it, in this case, I'm calling it Tour A and then Tour B. This line right here is the one that's added. I know it's getting a little geeky, but I'm going to go ahead and just do it anyway. I define this variable tour to load, and then I just have it's a logic, so it's 0 or 1, and I have it just doing a random math generator. So half of them are going to be below, half of them will be roughly, and then it runs either one. So let's get to, I think I could, I'm going to hop out and just start to show tools because I don't want to, how are we doing on time? Oh, I got plenty of time, but I want to spend more time into the tools. So let me go to, while I've been talking about this A/B test, I want to go to Google Analytics. So I'm going to jump around just a little bit. This is Google Analytics for my site. This is when you first open it, all kinds of stuff, things going on. You can run your own, create your own independent reports. Okay, here's mine. I've created this category called virtual tours, and then I'm interested in this thing called events. And this is a little bit cruder than it should be, but I'm going to go ahead and go on click, and then it'll show me down here. It's showing me the click type. And I'm seeing that the two things that I want to check is that I've got these two different scenes running. I'm using a rough number generator to split the traffic to the two separate pages. It's not perfect, right? Because it's random, but it's 36 to 41. So I'm getting a rough. As the numbers go up, it's going to be the difference between those. So it's a fairly effective A/B, right? You can just do a number generator. And then I'm seeing the two arrows. I'm tracking the two separate arrows from the two separate configurations. And I have these backwards, some issues with this, but I'm seeing already a difference between those two scenes. So I know that something's going on, right? Because they're identical for everything else except for in the one tour, I've turned off the thumbnails and the menus that were right here. So now the little arrow is more visible. I would have to study a little bit more to realize, does that mean that the 6 people who didn't click on that arrow A, are they, sorry, who didn't click on the arrow in the second scene B, where it's all crowded, did they bounce, or are they using the thumbnails or the menu? And right, I could explore that. I might learn that I shouldn't use all 3. I shouldn't be, sorry, my glasses keep coming down, but these are spares, so I lost my regular glasses. So, but do I run in 3 different navigation systems? Does that make sense? Have you ever thought about that in a virtual tour when you created it, and you can create a menu and a thumbnail and arrows on the ground, but does the user really want that, or do they want, a completely free interface where they're on the virtual tour? I don't know. But this is how you can test that out. So let's go back to the A/B testing. Now I wanted to start to do these are the measurement tools. So we're finally getting into the tools here, and they run into 2 separate categories, expensive and free. I like to think of the very high level tools that measure the bandwidth and hardware and the speed at which it loads, and testing the content for like where the person's trying to get the content from. That's an important aspect for us. If you're not familiar with what CDN is, and I didn't cover it in this, we can maybe talk about remedies to performance. But in our case, if we have a large virtual tour, or you've got a 360 video that you're loading up and you're in California, but the person that is visiting you're in California, and your server that you have, whoever it's with, right? Amazon server somewhere, whatever. It's physically in California as well, in a data center in California. But a person in Europe is on your website. Rather than having to transfer that big chunk of video, 360 video across that, you can use what's called a CDN, and then you're pulling that content from a data center. It's usually have to pay for this. It's not that expensive. But you're setting that content on a European server. So a person from Europe is pulling that big chunk of 360 video off of a data center down the street, not halfway across the world. So these are the tools, especially Lighthouse it can test for that. And it can also really test for the difference between devices, desktops, mobiles, browsers, platforms that they're on, things like that. You can start to get into the memory of things. The we're gonna look at Google Analytics again, and we're definitely gonna spend some time in Clarity. That's a fun one that just came up. But if you're again, if you're more at the developer level and you're getting into this, you wouldn't be wanting to use these applications or third-party ones. You would want to be at the component level. So in live, real time, if you're on Chrome, Chrome's the better one to work off of. I tend to use Safari. I shouldn't, but because Chrome's a little more stable, a little more powerful. But both of them have, and again, throughout this presentation, if you click on these, in these cases, it doesn't take you to the performance panel, but it'll take you to an overview, right? So sorry, I'm getting a little off track here, but I've hidden the resources or embedded the resources for everything I'm talking about throughout the presentation as links. So if you click on this performance panel, it's going to take you to a really nice overview of what you do in DevTools. You're seeing the same LCP and CLS numbers, and so I'm taking you to that information. But it's up to you. Which one do you want to use, right? That's, again, something as an audience I couldn't really pick out for you. But if you're doing website development, you're comfortable with, if you're familiar with these DevTools or Web Inspector, then I would forget about these, not Clarity though. And then use the tools within the browser so you can see everything real time. And if you're in Unity, then you would have already known about Profiler. And if you're not in Unity, stay away from it, because Profiler is all about coding efficiency, and we're not going to get into that. But that's a whole, memory leaks, and it's a whole different level on top of that. Now, Microsoft Clarity, I want to get to that because we got 20 minutes. So I'm going to try to spend some time in that. The Google Analytics collects the raw data. It has reporting features. We'll talk to that here just in a second. But for most people, it's a little overly complex, too much information in there. Even myself, I have a little bit of trouble getting into and getting what I want from analytics. It's like I'm having to push all this business related stuff out of the way. And I'm really interested in the metrics that we previously discussed about performance that relate to XR content. The Microsoft Clarity sits on top of, so you have to have Google Analytics hooked up. Then you put Clarity on top of that, or think of it as the dashboard or front end to it. So it serves the same function as what 3D Vista and Matterport are doing for you with their solutions. Is it's taking the data in and then presiding a little less complex. It's like Photoshop elements, if you will, or right, or Lightroom Light. So we'll get to that in a second. And then this is just an example of the cards or screens outputs that it'll give you, quick little glances at something. And this is those clicks I talked about, the rage click, dead clicks, and excessive scrolling that doesn't come up for us a lot. Scrolling, when you collect scroll depth data for us on our VR content or whatever, it's kind of a misnomer, because you don't have scrolling in a scene. You might be pulling up pop-ups and having a person scroll through text, but every time they go to a new scene, they're getting credit for 100% scroll because they don't, so that's a little bit more difficult to collect meaningful data on scroll depth within VR content, because it gets washed out by just the standard data collection. Okay, I wanted to just I promise, last geeking out. I'm going to just do this last one. It's just more of a, if you can tough it out, and there's tons of YouTube videos, and you can ChatGPT can give you a step-by-step explanation of how to do this. I showed you the first two steps. First step is getting the Google Analytics ID. Second step is pulling the Google tag, and putting it within your HTML page. And then the second two, which most people take care of you, except if you're KR Pano or doing it, is placing the J tag at the interaction, at the element level. And you first have to define it, and then you have to trigger it at the element level. And if you at all understand this, or you've seen code, or you've opened up your stuff and you can do this, this brute force method of doing it, you just get the raw data coming out, and it's a lot easier. However, it's not the best practice. The best practice, and I'll have to admit that I haven't made the transition, is to use Google Analytics tag at the very high level. So you're just collecting all the data off of that product, website or virtual tour. And within the virtual tour, the product that you've built, every element that you build it out of, a button, a menu tab, or whatever, that you're including a unique user ID, which, well, they have an element ID and then they'll have text. So what I'm getting at is, if you build your tour correctly, the Google Tag Manager, the existing analytics tools are collecting scrolling and button clicks and everything. Our virtual tours, all they need to do is add the IDs, the HTML IDs, so that that software can understand that within that VR environment that the button clicked and give you back that button ID. And you can kind of see it here on that this event label is I have broadly applied across all of my objects, that whenever an object is clicked, it triggers the Google Analytics data reporting, and it sends back, it gets the name of what that item is, and I'm using a unique item name, and it passes it back. So anyway, let's get into heat maps and user journeys. So this is the last of the technical stuff. I just want to, before I show it to you again, just reinforce heat maps are a broad look at user behavior. So looking at click areas, it will do the taps where people are at scrolling. User journey, which you haven't seen, is pretty crazy, is a recording of a single user's interaction. So it actually screen records the interaction with it. We're going to see that. And then the insights that it's really good at is patterns, rage clicks. You can see people scrolling around, or you've got a button and the buttons, maybe it's red against a slightly, brown background. And so people who are slightly colorblind aren't seeing it, and they're scrolling it past it, but they know they want it. They know they're on a submit page. So they're scrolling up and down. That's kind of an example of that. So so that's the last slide, and we've got 15 left. So let's get to really quickly, just one last look at something to explore. I'm not going to get into it, but in Google Analytics, off to the side, and I one of the reasons you probably don't want to spend a whole bunch of time trying to figure out Google Analytics reporting is that we're in a state of change where we're starting to see the introduction of AI, right? You're seeing it in all of your software. Here it is starting to appear in Google Analytics, and you can just click on Insight. It's got some questions that, basic performance, but you can do stuff, how many users from organic search in the last day, and you can actually type up here, what are the top 10 pages, and it'll give you an options here. It's giving you information about it. That little symbol that you're seeing there, the little star one, which I'm not sure if this is Gemini that they're using. I forget what AI engine is behind this, but I click on that and it just gives me the top pages off to the side. So I think we're transitioning to where you don't need to go in and create these, kind of custom reports the way that I'm doing it here, trying to figure out what my top pages are, and right, because it's a lot less, it's the same information, but just spit out to me. So that's just one thing I wanted to point out. We're down to 14 minutes. We've got to spend time on clarity. Okay, so this is Microsoft Clarity. Now let me start. There's a little bit of a lag in it. So I started it up because I wanted to look at the heat maps and recordings, because they're content. They take a little bit longer to load sometimes. So I preloaded them. So when you first come into here, though, this is what you'll see. You'll just go to clarity.microsoft. I guarantee most of you already have a Microsoft account, which is what you'll use to sign into this with. If you've used Office before or anything like that. So you sign in with your Microsoft account. And then if you've got a Google Analytics account, when it asks you to connect, that's the only tricky part, give it to Google email that controls that analytics account, not the Microsoft. That's the only stumbling block. Other than that, it takes you about 3 minutes to set it up. So here I've set it up on, and it's just like Google Analytics or Google Tag Manager. They're going to give you a snippet of code that you're going to paste into the head section of your HTML page, save it, put it on your server, connect to it, and then you connect Google Analytics to it. I've set up 3. I'm going to go ahead and click on the overall. So this is my overall website, and I'm going to change this to 30 days. And I can see some of the performance stuff right off the top that I talked about earlier. And shamefully, I have only been using this tool for about 2 weeks or whatever. So I may not, I may not tell you the right information, but I also am going to be revealing I got some problems I got to fix. So you can see right here the content. It'll show me where it's at. We'll do recordings in a different. I have popular pages. Now, something I'm going to quickly show that is very important to us and to our content is you have what's called URL parameters, and that's the question mark that you see with. It's also called a query string, and you're able to pass parameters, and that's independent of KRPano or 3D Vista. That's HTML. And I'm pretty certain that all of them, I know KRPano allows, and that's what this one is. And it's passing the scene and then where the click or tap point was. And I will be able to back out of that the heat map. You're going to see here in a second when I show you the heat map that the reason that 3D Vista is very nice is it's going through the extra work to take the Google Analytics data and convert it to a heat map on top of the equirectangular image. Because when you're viewing a virtual tour or a 3D model or whatever, AR, you have an instance of a new viewer, right? You've opened a new viewing window that's showing some new content. For virtual reality, for our case, it's that transformation of coordinate system where you're going from an X, Y, Z, X, Y being the plane, Z being the depth of screen, to spherical coordinates of horizontal, vertical, and field of view. And that projection can't be done by the browser in reverse. So they can't show you the image. But so when we get to heat maps, and I want to show, keep going through this. So anyway, this being able to pass these parameters within Clarity means that I can back out my heat maps from this. A very nice feature that I like about Clarity is when you collect data on websites, and people have seen this with traffic, most of the traffic you get is flyby. Now they've automatically, you see here at the top, they're automatically pulling the bots out. That's pretty nice. So I got 13 meaningless data points that are removed. Of that, I have 610 sessions, but still the majority of those 610 sessions, 324 of them, are what they're determining as low intent, meaning the person did not engage with my product, with my content. So the data, I don't want, that's not meaningful data to me. I'm not going to get good answers from that. The high intent one is. And so I got 32 sessions that were considered high intent. And I can see and I can sort those by, I get this always mixed up. There should be one in here where it does it by, I'm going to go right to recordings. Because as you see, I'm using filters on this system. So I had last 30 days. As soon as I touched high intention, everything else on here is being filtered out. So I'm drilling down, and yeah, this is where I can go look at who was in here the longest, highest. I'm going to go for high to low. So here I've got a user, 36 minutes. It tells who referred them, where did they enter, the URL, what did they leave, right? And because I'm, again, tracking the parameters, it's clumsy. I got to figure out a way to do it automatically. But that number would translate into telling me where exactly they're at in the tour and what exactly they're looking at in the field of view. More details, a very powerful thing about this. And this program is GDRP. This is the European privacy compliance. This one is GDRP compatible, which seemed kind of wild to me because here it is. You're recording. Let me point out some things here. What we're watching here is we're watching the recording of this user's entire session through my site. Let me move my little Zoom window out of the way. I can again, I mentioned that I'm not really good at this interface yet. I can track the sessions of this person. So this individual user has an ID. I think I can click on that ID and it takes me to how I just introduced this, but it'll start to tell me, it'll start to follow this individual user over time, which could be pretty popular. And I messed up because I didn't get the recordings. Okay, so it shows inactivity. And I'm going to point out a couple things here. I did not realize that I had masking on, so you're seeing these symbols and some of the text that it's putting out. You can put this to full masking, so all of the text can be masked out or just using symbols instead. I need to turn this so it's because I'm not having any information entered into this. But anyway, so you can go through and you can see the areas of activity. Now you notice that there's a black screen, right? I'm not seeing anything. That's because the everything else on here is being displayed in the XY coordinate system. It's part of the web interface. Even though it's built, in this case, by KR Pano, the instance or the element is an HTML, it's a web element. The VR content, or if it was AR or a 3D model being displayed by a viewer, is being displayed by a viewer. And so it won't display that. Got to figure out some way to back that out. But you can still find some very things. Now, I like, again, pointing to the importance of the introduction of AI tools throughout here and in all of the programs that I looked at. You're seeing these insights or summaries, and this one's a cool one. I can do top 10 recordings and then summarize. And so here the AI tool is going to, okay, can't generate. That's okay. Let's go to Heatmap and let me go to my main website. How do I ULR performance? Yeah, okay, here. So here it is. And I can go look at the heat map for because I've installed this Microsoft Clarity at the top level of my website. It's applying to everything underneath it. It's tracking, but I've also applied it at the page levels. Here you're seeing, and it's again because of the media, it's going to take a little bit to load this up, but this is my web page, so I would be able to scroll down. I would be able to look at it in the desktop, tablet, or mobile phone, and that could be, very important on desktop devices. But sorry, on mobile devices because the fold line or where people scroll up, if your buttons, the call to action is below where people typically will scroll up, you won't see it. And this is showing it's over time, it will load my website in the background and I can look at area versions. It's showing me at a high level what are the areas of interest on my website. And this for me is quite important because it's not showing you, but trust me, in the background here, I have a gallery item. So I've got a series of virtual tours that I've built for museums, right? I think this next one's industry or education or something. Well, nobody's that gallery or putting them in a line like that, nobody is visiting the next two areas. So I'm going to have to kind of redesign that things. But here's it should do it with this one. I was hoping it would load the background website so you could see it. You can do scroll as well. It'll show me in a visual. This is again, very important for mobile, but it's showing me in a graphical version how far people will actually, the majority. So I can see 25% of the people, they don't reach. People are not scrolling to the end of my thing. But here I can do a summarize, the heat maps. All right, so it's user behaviors, desktops, users frequently clicked on the services link as their first action, tablet users, key takeaways. So let me show you just really quickly and then we'll be maybe at an end, just so you can see what it's talking about on the website. So this is my website, and that's what it was talking about, and it was showing you that this button, first of all, most people are not scrolling past. Once they get to here, they click on that. That's the one that's at 37% virtual tours. They're not going to my Google Business Views, which is really kind of where I want to start to make my business. High-end museums are not, they're very difficult to get contracts for and stuff. They're not your bread and butter. It's the Google Business Views. So the fact that only 3% of my visitors are scrolling down to this point. Obviously, when I go look at these buttons, I'll see the same thing, and almost nobody's, well, for some reason, some people are, so they definitely do not like, this is not engaging this middle one. I don't know why. I'd have to do testing on that, but that's what it's talking about here and it's saying to improve user engagement, consider optimizing visibility and accessibility of the services section. So right, that's a good example. That's a good advice, is that here on the first page, that services button should be, if that's what people are wanting to click on and go, that should be larger, right? A larger font than what's on the next one, certainly larger than this. And rather than having these examples on this page, they should be, when I click the services and they jump, I'm using a bookmark landing page, not maybe probably is part of the problem, but anyway, I got redundancy and I'm picking that up, right? Google Virtual Tours, Google Business View Consulting, Virtual Tours, Google Business Views, and then I'm calling it immersive education. Anyway, you can tell them to go ahead and you can see this is how you can determine that, yes, you've built a website, it functions, all the buttons are clicking and everything, but unfortunately, in this case, it's not performing like you want. So let me go back to the last page here. I'll take us back into presentation mode. And then just kind of to end with, I just want to make three just kind of important notes on this. The importance of that when you're using these types of applications, tracking, analytical software, it's upon you to make sure that you're compliant with, I have the wrong one down there. That's the accessibility compliance. You want to make sure that you're the privacy standards and stuff, make sure that you're meeting those, because the way that it'll start to work is that the second you embed that Google Analytics code into it, oh, sorry, I was just looking at the questions there. As soon as you put that code in there into your web page, there's going to be a bot that's going to say, hey, this site has tracking technology on it. And if you're in Europe or some of the other areas where there are a little bit of things and you don't have the option for them to sign out, you're going to start to get yourself into some issues with it. The other one is that, just last two, is accessibility and digital marketing are, they weren't covered in here. They should have been, but those will be future webinars. And so I didn't want to start to talk about those because I already had enough of a subject to go through. So I'm going to go ahead and stop at this point and trying to find where my thing went. Oh, I can't find my window. Oh, there it is. Okay. So I'm going to open it up to questions. I know we don't have a large group today, which is, if you're viewing this recording and you have some questions, this is why sign up in time. So where can I find a good tutorial for 3D Vista and GA4? GA4. That's a good point. I don't have a good one on that. I think in the presentation that I had, the 3D Vista, it takes you to that page, and that, check on that, because I don't have you going to the 3D Vista site. I have you going to a 3D Vista write-up on how they're using analytics and what you can do with their analytics. So, and that web page is not very accessible, or it's not readily apparent on the 3D Vista. So see if that's the case. If perhaps the link that I provided takes you to where what you're looking for. And if it isn't, just write me an email. We can start a separate thing on that, and I can go look on that a little bit for you. I tell you that I felt that the heat maps, the analytics within 3D Vista, I thought were pretty good. And if you're looking for just a tutorial about how they're doing within there, my guess is that 3D Vista is the source for that. But it looks like one of my buddies here is gonna provide an answer. I don't use 3D Vista, so I need to get an evaluation copy of it. It's a very cool program, and I'm finding that when I'm wanting to look for new features or whatever, that I'm seeing those popping up in there. And then I try to figure out how to do that feature in KRPano or by hand. But um, for a turnkey solution, if you don't mind the hosting fees, or if you're hosting already, certainly that's a great option. If you're hosting your stuff on 3D Vista, I would go with those analytics and then outgrow the analytics. I don't think I would even bother if I was doing, to be honest, if I was doing 3D Vista and I had a hosting, I don't think I'd bother with any of this stuff. I just go in there, get what I want out of that, and then outgrow it. And then if I need to, I can go start to look at more expensive options. Let's see. So any more questions? One of the board members, I'm still on, I guess. Sometimes I always wonder, I don't hear people. I know we got a small group, so.
Well, I'm still here.
Okay, good. I have a fear that, I'm going to do a whole
Yes.
recording and then you guys are going to call me on my cell phone. You cut off about 5 minutes into that. Um, yeah, we're definitely going to, this is the answer person's asking. We'll be more webinars about this topic and in more depth in the future. And absolutely, uh, this was a tough one because I was trying to just like the 10 pounds of flour in a 5-pound sack. There's so much to this. And I think I went through maybe a little bit too much dry material, right? It's my feeling right now is I should have spent more time in clarity and maybe analytics, or get an evaluation copy of 3D Vista, or get a copy and show you how to use it within there. So we might that might be another webinar for us to do is really get into UI design. I've been wanting to do one of those for a while, is what makes a good virtual tour, what types of interfaces. And I've been trying to study that. I've been doing some fun things where I'll take, I think all the packages do it. I know KRPano produces, I think it's got 4 or 5 default interfaces that it gives you. And I wanted to just take a tour that's popular, that got a lot of traffic going through, and then just use the 5 default interfaces and then start from there. Like, what do people like the glass look? Do they like, do they even want menu buttons at the bottom? So yeah, we'll do another one about that. Stick around for, or definitely look for, there'll be one on accessibility. And that, again, is a performance metric that I didn't cover. And we're definitely going to have one on marketing. We're going to have a person, one of the board members who's got and it's going to be about, running a successful VR business. And I might add some things in there to like how you're doing marketing. And I didn't cover anything about Facebook pixels. We could do a whole webinar on that one so I covered performance of a UI UX design of an experience, but there's performance of marketing and social, building traffic, social media integration. What types of campaigns work? Does a Facebook ad work? Should you be using a Google ad? And then how do you, with these same performance tools, track that it's actually, you're spending $50 and you're getting 5 5 quotes requests for virtual tours, or if you're real estate and you're doing real estate virtual tours and you're setting up a local Google service ad for local photography services, and that's an expensive one. You might be paying anywhere from like 10, $15 per lead, but you've got the tracking tools to know that you put $15 out on a Google local service ad and you get a, $1,000 job or something. So yeah, we'll cover that. Anything else? I know we got a light group today, so let's see.
I'll say, clarity looks fascinating.
Isn't it?
I know, for instance, in my tours, there's schools that use them, and I can track, I can see all, the whole class opens up the tour, and you can track how people go through it all. But that's all just data. And, to actually then compile it and find out what really are the trends and that sort of stuff has been the hard part. And clarity looks like maybe it could be the tool that'll make that clearer for me. But
It's The rage clicks and dead clicks are it's been showing me. We were talking yesterday when we were going through this about I have a client and this is a design, not dispute or whatever, but it's a design discrepancy or difference between the two of us is I've built this virtual tour and there's 8 virtual tours for a company or client, and but the 8 virtual tours are, you think of it, for 8 different departments, and each of the departments or groups or whatever, the virtual tours for them, they didn't want cross traffic. So when you're in the one virtual tour, maybe it's auto repair or whatever, right? They wanted you to stay in auto repair. They didn't want you to have to go over to the showroom floor. But as a user, and so they have the interface and they've got their logo at the upper left. And I told them it is very common expectation of user behavior, right? You have to design to what your user experiences. Everybody's familiar with as soon as they're lost or they don't know where they're at in the content, or they're in this virtual tour and they're getting bored with it, they don't exit out to the the repair shop page. They're going to click that logo in the upper left, expecting to jump back to the 8 galleries, the 8 separate pieces. And they're like, no, I know, but from just political, we just don't want that. We want to keep people. And they're like, you're going to end up with people clicking on the thing. And I won't pull it up but I could pull it up in Clarity, and Clarity shows it to me by that heat map that like 30% of I got like a 30% rage click. And you can see it in the recordings. You can watch, and at the end, they drift up and they're and then they're gone. So I'll show them that and that before it was, well, we've already had this discussion, in a design meeting. It was like, no, that's not really, trust me, that's not really good VR. It's political. They're overriding me. Now I can go back with data and show, people are leaving, and then that's boom, done. So that's a kind of an important one for if you're working with on clients and my clients are great, but you will occasionally run across a client who's, like, oh, I want that blue, or, it's got to be, this font or whatever else. These tools provide you with the option of, okay, let's try that. Let's see how, let's try blue. But I think, a light orange is probably going to be a little bit better emotion or feeling. And then you just run the A/B test and go back to your client. And then, because then you're out of an argument and you're out to like, oop, here's the data. So data-driven design and also
chargeable. It's a chargeable service.
yeah, good point. I did not mention that at all either. Is this performance testing, or maybe people out there don't want to do this type of performance testing? We got a person out there, get good at this, figure out how to code a KR panel plugin. I'm trying to, but I'm not good enough. And I know somebody else going to beat me. Code a KR Pano heat map plugin that takes the query string, the scene and viewpoint court parameters, and extracts out of that just a standard. I mean, it's not that difficult. Where did they touch within this 2x1 grid? And then, the more they touch, make it more red, and then export that as a PNG on top of the equirectangular image, and there's your heat map. And boy, add that to KR Pano. That's, you could make some money at that. So there, and you'll have to give me money now. You have to give me 10% because it's my idea. But anyway, no, it's that's just to summarize, my approach to these is the way, if you're using, I said don't, it's like shiny red balls, you don't know what to use. But if you are using 3D Vista and hosting services, go look at the analytics. Don't bother with anything else. Go look at the analytics and see if it does what you want, and then outgrow it. If you liked Clarity, go load up Clarity. Don't bother with any of the other tools that you see in here, and see what it does for you.
Daniel has a great comment. Just use ChatGPT to, since you already have KR Panel kind of loaded into ChatGPT, just ask ChatGPT to create the plugin.
That's not silly at all, because the way that I did my A/B testing was, I'm embarrassed. I knew how to program that, but I was being lazy, and I'm trying to get this presentation done. I took the index page, gave it to ChatGPT, and just simply said, this page, this is a KRPano launch page. It loads a tour file. I want to do an A/B test where it will load a tour A.xml or a tour B.xml, recode the page. And it comes up with the random number generator, which I thought was pretty clever. I was expecting something, you know, it was going to use a back-end cookie or something like that to record a session, right? And then each time it would, no, just pumps that out. I take the page, I copy it, and I just replace it on the server, and it works right off the bat. So yeah, you're also, you know, like people are asking, you asked a question about is there a good tutorial for 3D Vista and GA4? Try ChatGPT. I'm pretty impressed with how, because the way that ChatGPT, the other eyes work is if the information is out there, may not be correct, it will pull it and give it to you. So if somebody has written a good tutorial explanation on it, your best chance of finding it is with something like ChatGPT. Just understand that it likes to hallucinate, right? That's the word for, it's like it just wants to provide you the answer. And it's like 95% there. You know what? I'll make the other 5% up because I want to provide 100% answer. Yeah, that's a tricky thing with AI. Very, very powerful. But it's like I liken it to an intellectual chainsaw. And powerful, powerful tool. But if you don't understand how to use it, you're going to cut yourself with it.
Mhm.
And I already did. I already had some problems where I could use this AI to do this, and sent out some script, and I had clients write me back because I was writing about their subject, and they were like, "Where'd you get this from?" And I was like, "Oh, I was using an AI engine." And they were historians, and historians hate AI. I don't know why, but boy, they really dislike AI right now.
Mhm.
Anyway, museum folks and stuff. I work with a lot of museum folks. Oh, they don't want to. They hate AI. Like they don't even know how it works. But anyway,
Rewriting history.
Yeah,
well, we do that all the time, right? That's
right.
makes it easier to do. Anyway, any last questions for anybody?
Let me just toss in early A/B testing that I did. Now it's several years ago, but we were having a controversy, I guess, about do you start a tour with audio, or do you have the person choose whether they want to have audio? In other words, present audio, let them turn it off, or have them decide, do they want to start with audio? What we found is that if I gave them the choice up front, almost nobody chose to run the tour with audio, including a voiceover tour guide, as well as music or whatever. If I just started with the audio, and then they could always jump out, almost nobody jumped out. They just kept going with the audio. And since with the audio was a much more rich experience, that's the direction that I went by default.
Yeah, I'd like to. I'm hoping that a lot of people start to do this, and certainly, you know, other board members or members of IVRPA, and that, you know, as we get our website redone, you can start to the forum posts and stuff that you can start to create some pretty interesting little, you know, studies that you do, little R&D projects, because there's other people, like I use KRPano. There's lots of people who use KRPano. Nobody's ever done a study to say, hey, of the 5 or 6 default interfaces that everybody in KRPano usually starts with, are they all 5, you know, 20% popularity, or you know, is one, because my impression is there's a couple of them that are very ugly. And then there's a couple like the glass and stuff that are beautiful, and I always work off the glass. That's just my opinion though. I don't know. I'm kind of out of fashion. I gotta, right? And I have no idea what the music is nowadays and things, and if we're doing UIX design, that's part of it, right? Part of, you know, we are building things that have a theme to them, to our style, and that changes. Our people want a modern, clean? Do they want I mean, we know that the fonts and colors, you got the Pantone color of the year, that kind of stuff. So yeah, this ability to refine it and then to build some experience on, because you start to realize, like you just said there, if you start to tour with audio, better engagement. People are in that mode. If you have them turn it on or off, they probably are like, oh, it's stupid. You know, it's going to be music. They don't know what the audio is. Their just natural reaction is to turn off. I don't want any stupid, you know, beat music in the background. Turn it off.
I look at it as if you gave a person on YouTube the option of starting the video with sound or without, you know, It's just not the same.
Yeah, that's kind of like I always have to turn the volume. I always turn the volume back on. Yeah. That's interesting. And you get that experience, and you know how to pitch to a client too. If you have a client that they want to do a walking tour of, Virginia, 1700s, I don't know, something, historic or really old. And so their audience is going to be a little bit older than usual. And they're kind of that Ken Burns type of crowd. To pitch to them, hey, I know that the audio is definitely more engaging. I've done this in the past, and I got that you can show them the data. It starts to become a selling. We've talked about that before, is if you can't have a metric, if you can't show in numbers how this is going to improve or be of value to them, then it's just a sunk cost for them. It's some novelty item, and that's big for us, right? Because most of the time we're trying to pitch something that's unique, and that's the toughest business to be in, is you're pitching something to a client, and you have to explain what it is they're buying, why they need it, and then you eventually get around to the price. Where other people, if you're selling a shoe or whatever, it's just price and quantity, quality or whatever. So anyway.
Yeah, it's also a matter of if they are bidding out a virtual tour project to multiple suppliers. If you come across as the person who actually really knows what they're doing, even if it's a little bit more expensive, they know that they're going to get their money's worth from you.
Commodity versus quality.
Yeah.
I would say it's a good point. And I would also add that if you're interfacing with a business person, right, you're building VR products for a restaurant or somebody like that, they are going to, and they're a franchise, or they're bigger and they've got a nice website. They're going to be much better at these analytics than you are. They're going to be using them because they're tied to their ad money and their marketing. So they're really going to be into the analytics already, right? That you're going to be talking their language. And
their bosses require that information to fund the project.
I wouldn't be surprised if at some point, as businesses become more familiar with analytics and clarity, and they understand what dead clicks are and this kind of stuff and engagement rates, that they might start to ask you for the metrics on your virtual tour, right? Or you might start getting contract specifications you'll design a virtual tour that has no greater than 0.05 cumulative layout shift, because they know that they don't want things jumbling around. So I would say this is definitely a field where the more commercial you get, the deeper you get into this, the more you start to build products that are being used in marketing campaigns or they're right, which is what you want to do. You want to build something that the customer, the client, has a lot of value. As they get increasingly into analytics and to digital marketing and social media integration, your product has to follow along with that. And so I already have it. Clients demand now from me that they just assume, not demand. They assume that the tour I am providing has interaction level Google Analytics data. And I work with large enterprises, large, companies. So when I'm talking to their IT staff are telling me, we need the following elements tracked. And then they go make their own custom reports, right? So they're far better at analytics than I am, but they are enforcing on me that the virtual tour must have analytics at, every hotspot. Click on it, it's got to be where it's at, seen, and they give me the nomenclature that I have to use so that in their reports they're getting the terms. The IDs are popping up, so I don't specify that stuff. But anyway, I think we're kind of at the end. Wrap it up, right? An hour and a half.
Yep.
2 more minutes if we want to talk about some.
So this obviously has been recorded. It will be available probably, depending upon how quickly we get to a couple of these things, in the next couple of days. And then an email will go out to everyone that the recording is available. If you're an IVRPA member, you can watch it again. I know that for me, a lot of this blew past me. I'm going to want to take a look at it again. Luckily, we have the PDF, which is a great resource. But this and so much other material is available on the website if you're a member. So if you're not, I highly encourage you to join. I think you'll find the money is well worth it. Lauren, you are our resident expert on all things.
Well, I appear that way, but I assure you that, well, I was showing that, I thought I'm an expert. Well, I'm not an expert, but I thought I'm pretty good at building web pages. So I built my own web page on a Bootstrap mock-up, and then I installed, and I thought it's working great, right? I'm getting good traffic, or I think, and then I installed the Clarity and I have to install Clarity on my thing. So I can't have any of my clients start to produce. So the only thing I got is my website to do a heat map, and it's coming up like, oh, it's got real problems with it. But
Lauren, I have one question. So is Clarity a replacement for Google Analytics, or it's an add-on?
It's an add-on. And one of the things that I really like is that they're advertising by Microsoft, and I'm not sure what the politics this is. They advertise it as free forever. Which I don't know what they're up to, and they've put some serious resources into it. So they're making some kind of a play. And I think what the play is that Microsoft, they do SharePoint, right? So they're at an enterprise level. So they're dealing a lot of products with big companies. And so their clients definitely want analytics, right? But Google Analytics, Google doesn't make the most friendly products. And so Google Analytics it's not easy to get reports out, powerful as can be, right? And that's what they've made, this very powerful data collection machine. And then just some custom reports you can make. So Clarity is the front end, or the simplified, right? The working man's, layman's front end to it. I like it.
But you need the Google data to feed into.
Yes. So you need to be able to install the Google Analytics tag. And the people that are on here, or if people watch this recording and you think that that's difficult, or you don't want to get the Google Analytics, just write me an email. I'll walk you through it. We could even do a little Zoom call. I'd like to see it's not that hard. And so you install the snippet of code that you get from, if you've done analytics, you do the same process. You go to Microsoft, get an account, sign in with your Microsoft email or ID.
Does that need to be a paid account, or just like a Microsoft Hotmail account?
Nope, it's free, totally free.
Totally free.
So you take their snippet of code, paste it right below the Google Analytics piece of code, and then you go back to the Clarity and you connect the data stream. So they make the connection to the analytics on your, and that's where they're going to ask you. That's the tricky part. They're going to ask you to provide your contact information for the Google Analytics data stream, which always has to be the Gmail account. Right. So just make sure, and you connect to Google and Microsoft. I trust, like we said, we were joking yesterday, and like, oh, I trust Microsoft, I trust Google implicitly. So, and Apple too. So anyway, it doesn't, but yeah, it's the front end.
One other question you mentioned, I think, was it Clarity? You said was GD, whatever, DDP.
Yeah, GDRP. Yeah.
But the question is, if the data is coming from Google, is the Google data GDPR compliant?
That's a very good point, isn't it?
Right.
I know that
imagine that it's not. I mean,
yeah, I think you got to be careful. We have an international audience, and so in the US we're pretty lax on it, but increasing towards, we're following Europe on this one, and that's if you're the second you put the Google Analytics and you put it out there on a published page, make sure you've got the opt out, the all, and everybody's clicking cancel anyway. I don't know what the whole point of that. Like, you consent to, like, get out of the way, consent bar. Right. So I guess maybe there is some people that are, if they go to the logic of it is a little confusing to me, because if you put that opt out bar at the bottom and they say, no, I don't agree, then, they're off, they don't get to go any further. So I don't know. It's just a liability write-off, I guess, or whatever. But be careful, though. I mean, tracking is you are collecting information. So you have a responsibility to make sure that your, I didn't get into it, but that if you're using that clarity and you're recording the user sessions and you have a form where you're having the people enter their name and some information, you should be masking that out so that the recording is showing just, jumbled text. Even if you're in compliance with that GDRP thing, I don't think you want to have, you don't want recordings with people's names and addresses on it, right? So that's just, there's no point to it. We're not collecting credit card information, so that PII or personal identifiable information, just stay away. So anyway.
Okay.
Oh, okay. So somebody's correcting me. That's good. If you decide client to GDPR, you can still enter the website, but you don't get any data in the GRFA. Okay, cool. That makes more sense. So I had that wrong. So thank you.
Okay. All right. In that case, I believe we are ready to wrap. I thank the folks for coming today, and Lauren, again, thank you so much for putting all the work into this and producing, to me, a fascinating
Thank you.
presentation.
Yeah, you're welcome. And to anybody who's on or watching this, if you are into the heat map thing, or you're using KR Panel, you're interested in how we might do this, or how we could do it for some of the panel TVR, please contact me. I think it's a pretty fascinating subject, and there's probably a nice opportunity here to create something very, very useful to the community, because it's not, we're keep having to use tools that they're coming from a business environment, so we're having to leverage them for our uses. So it'd be nice to start to create plugins and things like that give us right what we want. Everybody, I'm good.